Hey everyone, welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at the Lokpal. This is one of the most important topics for UPSC aspirants,
Absolutely.
and specifically for the mains exam.
Mm.
Also could be important for the prelims exam as well.
Yeah.
And we're kind of drawing
Yeah.
some of our insights today from a recent article in the Hindu, which commemorated the first ever Lokpal Foundation Day.
Oh.
And it's an interesting thing, like, okay, it's January 16th, 2025, and we're celebrating people like Anna Hazar. What is this Lokpal? And why is it such a big deal?
Yeah. So the Lokpal and Lokayuktas Act of 2013 coming into effect was a huge moment for India's fight against corruption.
Yeah, when you hear the term Lokpal, it does sound kind of intimidating, especially if you're just starting your UPSC prep.
Yeah.
So can you break it down for us? What exactly is it?
So think of the Lokpal as kind of like a watchdog, a very powerful independent body that investigates corruption against public officials.
Okay, so
this includes everybody from high-ranking bureaucrats to the prime minister.
Like they can investigate the prime minister?
They can investigate the prime minister.
That's some serious power. I can already see how this is going to be a hot topic for UPSC examiners.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's not just a symbolic thing.
It's not just symbolic.
It actually
has teeth.
Yeah, it has some teeth.
It can initiate inquiries,
Yeah.
gather evidence, and even recommend prosecution.
So understand how it works is powers. And the Act of 2013 itself, that's got to be crucial.
Yes, it's very important.
And you might even see essay questions comparing it to institutions in other countries.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, so that reminds me of the comparative politics questions that often pop up in the mains exam.
Yeah.
So are there
other
countries that have institutions similar?
Yes, there are many countries that have institutions similar to the Lokpal.
So what are some?
For instance, Scandinavian countries have an ombudsman system, which has actually been around for centuries, and places like Hong Kong and Singapore have anti-corruption commissions.
That's the kind of connection I feel like UPSC examiners would love to see, showing that you understand the global context.
Exactly.
But before we go international, let's clear up something that I think often confuses aspirants. What's the difference between the Lokpal?
So the Lokpal operates at the national level, and the Lokayuktas are set up in individual states.
Oh, so it's like a national and then a state level.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. And I remember reading that Maharashtra was actually a pioneer in setting up its Lokayukta.
They set up the Lokayukta way back in 1971.
1971, wow.
Long before the national Lokpal.
So we've got these Lokpals and Lokayuktas, these powerful watchdogs. But how do they actually go about their work?
So imagine somebody files a complaint with the Lokpal alleging corruption by a particular official. The Lokpal doesn't just jump into conclusions. They have their own inquiry wing that conducts a preliminary investigation.
So it's like a fact-finding mission.
It is.
They don't just take things at face value. They
scrutinize documents, interview witnesses, and gather evidence.
Yeah, so they're actually digging deep to find out what's going on. And then if
they find sufficient evidence, they can refer the case to agencies like the CBI for further investigation and prosecution. So remember, the Lokpal doesn't have its own prosecutorial power.
So it's more about setting the wheels of justice in motion.
Exactly.
But what happens if somebody files a false complaint?
That's an important point. And the Lokpal Act actually has provisions for penalizing people who file false complaints with malicious intent.
Because you don't want people to use it as a tool for personal vendetta.
You don't want to.
Or to settle scores.
Exactly.
But on the other hand, you also don't want to discourage people who have legitimate concerns from coming forward.
It's about finding that balance.
It's about finding that balance.
And that's one of the criticisms that the Lokpal has faced. Some argue that the penalties are too harsh and could deter genuine whistleblowers. So it's a delicate issue with no easy answers.
Yeah, this seems like the perfect thing to unpack.
Yeah.
In a mains answer.
Absolutely.
Analyzing these trade-offs between preventing frivolous complaints and protecting whistleblowers who are speaking truth to power.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about what it is. We talked about its powers. But why are institutions like the Lokpal so important?
It's about establishing a system of accountability, building trust in government, and fostering a culture of transparency.
So when people see that even the most powerful people can be held accountable, it reinforces the idea that No one is above the law.
Nobody is above the law.
So it's like sending a message
Exactly.
that corruption won't be tolerated.
Yes.
There are consequences.
Yes, consequences for abusing power.
And that message resonates not just
Yeah.
within India, but globally as well.
Globally, absolutely.
And remember those comparative examples we were just talking about?
Yeah.
The Lokpal puts India on the map
Yeah.
as a nation that is serious about tackling corruption,
Yes. Committed to good governance.
committed to good governance, and ethical leadership.
Mm.
And for you,
Mm.
as future civil servants, understanding the Lokpal is about understanding a foundation of ethical conduct.
Exactly.
Good service.
It's about internalizing the values of integrity, transparency, and accountability.
Okay. So we've learned a lot about the Lokpal. We've talked about how important it is.
Yeah.
But no system is perfect.
No system is perfect.
So let's dive into some of the limitations
Yeah.
that have been raised about its structure and functioning.
Absolutely. So while the Lokpal is a powerful tool, it's important to be aware of its limitations.
Okay.
And trust me, understanding these limitations will not only make you a better informed citizen,
Right.
but it'll also give you an edge in your UPSC exam.
Okay.
So let's start with the time limit. For filing complaints under the current Lokpal Act, you only have 7 years.
7 years.
From the date of the alleged act of corruption to file a complaint.
7 years. That's a pretty tight window, especially when you consider how difficult it can be to uncover corruption, gather evidence, and build a strong case.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, sometimes corruption isn't discovered immediately.
Exactly.
Evidence can be buried. Witnesses can be intimidated. It can take years for the full extent of the wrongdoing to come to light.
Yeah.
Imagine a case where corruption took place like a decade ago. Under the current rules, you wouldn't even be able to file a complaint.
Yeah, that's right.
And imagine a corrupt official knowing that they're essentially immune. After 7 years, I feel like that would just encourage them to be even more brazen in their action.
You're a very valid concern.
And I mean, we're not just talking about hypothetical situations.
Right. No, we're not.
There have been real cases.
There have been real cases.
Where this 7-year limitation
has
hindered justice. Cases where corrupt officials have gotten away with their crimes because the clock ran out.
Yeah, it makes you realize that. Even with institutions like the Lokpal, there are vulnerabilities.
Yeah, it really makes you think about the importance of staying vigilant and advocating for reforms that strengthen these institutions.
Awareness is key, especially for UPSC aspirants.
So that's a big one. The 7-year limit. What are some other limitations?
One that's drawn a lot of debate is the question of penalties for false complaints.
Okay. Well, we want to make sure people don't misuse the system.
Yeah.
There's this concern that the penalties might be too harsh.
Yeah.
If they're too severe, it might scare people away from coming forward, even if they have legitimate concerns. Like we said, it's about finding that.
It is about finding the right balance.
Right.
And to make it even more complex, the Lokpal Act doesn't really clearly define what constitutes a false complaint.
So it's not just about the richness of the punishment. It's about the clarity of the law itself.
Yeah, right.
So it sounds like this is another area where potential reforms could really strengthen the Lokpal and make it a more...
And this is the kind of nuanced analysis the UPSC examiners are looking for.
Okay, so we've talked about the Lokpal, we've talked about its powers, and we've talked about 7-year time limit for complaints, the debate surrounding penalties for false accusations. We've talked about how all these nuances are really crucial for any UPSC aspirant.
Exactly.
But it's not just about memorizing facts. It's about developing
understanding the system.
A critical understanding. The fundamental to India's governance. Equipping yourself to be informed citizens. And ethical leaders. So stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive, where we'll explore even more limitations of the Lokpal. And we'll start talking about potential solutions to make it a more effective weapon in the fight against corruption.
Welcome back, everyone.
All right, so we talked about the time limit for filing complaints, the debate around penalties for false accusations. What other limitations should UPSC aspirants be aware of?
One that often comes up, especially in discussions about good governance, which is key in your UPSC syllabus, is the question of the Lokpal's independence.
Its independence, yeah, if it's supposed to. Hold even the most high-ranking officials accountable. It needs to be independent.
Yeah, exactly. And this concern isn't unfounded. The selection process for the Lokpal involves high-ranking government officials.
Okay.
So this has led to questions about potential biases, and whether the Lokpal can truly function without any pressure from the very people it's meant to oversee.
It's almost like a paradox.
Yeah, it's a bit of a catch-22.
You need the government to set it up and empower it, but then you also need it to be free from government influence.
Exactly.
It really makes you think about the checks and balances needed to ensure true independence.
And it's not just the selection process. Think about the resources allocated to the Lokpal, its staff, its investigative powers. All of these can be influenced by
the government of the day.
Yeah, those subtle levers of power.
Exactly.
Makes me think about how seemingly small decisions can have a big impact on an institution's effectiveness.
It's the kind of thing I feel like UPSC examiners might ask you.
Yeah, the UPSC isn't just testing your knowledge. It's assessing your critical thinking skills, your ability to see the interconnectedness of these issues.
Yeah, this is making me think about those ethics questions in the mains exam.
Yeah.
You're often presented with these complex ethical dilemmas, and you have to navigate them as a future officer. So understanding the potential for conflicts of interest, like the ones we're discussing, is really important.
The UPSC wants to see that you can apply these concepts in real-world situations.
Okay, so we've got the time limit, we've got the penalties, we've got the question of independence. Are there any other limitations?
There's one more big one, and it's about the Lokpal's track record so far. Well, the Lokpal has received thousands of complaints. Since its inception, the number of actual prosecutions has been quite limited.
Really? So there's this gap between receiving complaints and taking concrete action.
There is.
It raises some questions about
its effectiveness. Yeah. Now, there are several factors that could contribute to this. One is the complexity of corruption cases, gathering evidence, building a watertight case takes time and resources.
It's not like hands are catching somebody red-handed with a bribe.
Yeah.
These cases often involve intricate financial transactions, shell companies, a whole network of individuals. It's like untangling this big web.
Exactly.
And remember, the Lokpal relies on other agencies like the CBI for the actual investigation and prosecution. So delays and inefficiencies in those agencies can really impact the Lokpal's effectiveness.
So it's like a chain reaction.
Chain reaction,
A bottleneck in one part can have ripple effects.
Okay, and remember, we were talking about how the Lokpal has the power to investigate. The Prime Minister, well, there are actually some exceptions to that power.
There are. So even the Prime Minister isn't fully under Lokpal's purview.
What are those exceptions?
Like international relations, security, public order, atomic energy, space, all of those are excluded.
So basically, anything deemed sensitive to national security or foreign policy that's outside its jurisdiction.
Exactly.
So there are limits, even to the Lokpal's reach. It's not a silver bullet.
It's not.
But it's one tool in a larger toolkit for combating corruption.
That's a great way to put it.
And this is something I feel like UPSC aspirants need to keep in mind. The exam isn't about knowing the Lokpal exists. It's about critically analyzing its scope, its limitations, its impact on governance. Yeah, it makes me think about those essay questions where you have to propose solutions to these complex problems that you don't know.
The weakness.
How can you strengthen it?
And that's where we're heading next now that we've explored the limitations.
Okay.
Let's shift gears and discuss potential solutions.
I'm really eager to hear what you have to say about this because it's one thing to acknowledge the limitations, but we also need to be solution-oriented.
We do.
Especially for future civil servants who might one day be in a position to influence policy and bring about change.
Exactly.
So
there are several promising avenues for reform.
Okay.
Some experts argue that the 7-year limitation period should be revisited, perhaps extended or made more flexible in certain cases.
So really addressing those key limitations we talked about. But what about the issue of independence?
That's the million-dollar question. How can we make sure that it's truly free from political influence?
Yeah, how do we make sure it's truly independent?
So some propose a more transparent and independent selection process, perhaps involving a broader range of stakeholders, including civil society representatives and legal experts, others argue for, greater financial autonomy. So reducing its dependence on government funding.
It's about creating this system where it can truly act as an independent watchdog without fear or favor.
Exactly.
For those of you preparing for the UPSC, these are the kind nuanced solutions that you should be thinking about.
Don't just settle for superficial answers. Dig deep.
No.
Analyze the problem and propose practical, well-reasoned solution.
Okay, and remember, this is an ongoing process.
It is.
Right? Yeah. The fight against corruption is a marathon, not a sprint.
That's a great way to put it.
It requires constant vigilance, adaptation, and a willingness to learn from both our successes and our failures. We've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about the Lokpal, its powers, its significance. We've analyzed its limitations, and we've even started to explore some potential solutions for reform.
And we've done it all while keeping the UPSC aspirant in mind.
We've really highlighted the key takeaways that will help you not only excel in your exams, but also equip you to be informed, ethical, and effective leaders in the future.
Absolutely.
So stay tuned for the final part, our deep dive. We'll wrap up our discussion.
Leave you with some thought-provoking questions to ponder as you continue your UPSC journey.
And as always, we encourage you to engage with us in the comments section, share your insights, ask your questions, and let's keep this conversation going. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been talking about the Lokpal. We've unpacked its powers, its significance, and even delved into some of its limitations. But as future civil servants, it's not enough to just understand the problems we need to think about.
Right.
Solutions.
Absolutely.
And like we've been discussing, there are several ways to strengthen the Lokpal, from revisiting the time limit to ensuring greater independence. And let's not forget the need to improve its track record when it comes to actual prosecutions. More convictions would send a strong message that corruption won't be tolerated.
Absolutely.
It's about making sure it has the resources, the teeth, to truly make a difference.
And it's not just about institutional changes. It's about fostering a culture of
accountability and transparency.
That's a crucial point. You know, you as future IAS officers, you'll be in a position to shape that culture. You'll be
setting an example for others to follow.
The Lokpal can be a powerful tool, but it needs individuals who are committed to integrity and ethical conduct.
It's almost like the Lokpal is a reflection of our collective commitment to fighting corruption. If we're serious about good governance, that seriousness needs to be reflected in how we design, implement, and use institutions like the Lokpal.
I completely agree. The Lokpal isn't just a legal mechanism. It's a statement about the kind of society that we want to build.
So, as you continue your UPSC journey, I'll leave you with this question. Imagine you were in charge of designing the ideal anti-corruption system. What features would you prioritize? What lessons would you draw from the Lokpal's strengths and weaknesses?
That's a great question, because ultimately the fight against corruption requires more than just
laws
and institutions. It requires a shift in mindset, a collective commitment.
Ethical conduct.
And who better to lead that charge than the future leaders of India, the very people listening to this deep dive right now. So keep learning, keep questioning, and keep striving to make a difference. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more insights on crucial topics. For your UPSC journey, we're here to support you every step of the way.